Hey everybody, welcome back to Concierge Confidential. I'm your host, Brian Ortega, and this week we are talking budgets. Well, at least budget hotels. So we know that on this particular show, we don't tend to talk about a lot of the affordable things in Vegas or, budget deals, but I thought it'd be kind of, interesting to take a look at it because I did get a message on Instagram asking whether Excalibur or Sahara was better. And I was like, that's a very good question. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in on it. So we're going to be talking about it on this week's episode of Concierge Confidential, where we're going to be actually exploring not just the room prices, but also like how you balance, staying at a budget hotel on the Strip. Does location matter? If it's cheaper someplace else, is it worth it? So we're going to be diving into some of that on this week's episode of Concierge Confidential. All right, guys, so let's go ahead and dive into it. We're talking budget hotels. So one of the questions was, which one of these hotels was better, Excalibur or Sahara? So I actually pulled it up. So let's just go ahead and talk about rates in general. So typically, I'm actually looking at the rates for these hotels. And surprisingly, you are able to find these hotels between like $30 and $40 during the week, just depending on which weekend. Like, for example, I'm recording this on June 10th. So I'm just looking at, like, if I wanted to book on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. On Tuesday, it's $29. Wednesday, it's $32. And Thursday is $45. So obviously, this does not include the resort fees, which is typically about $40. So typically, you just add that on top. Sometimes it's 45, to be honest. So honestly, if you put 30 and 45 together, looking at $70 a night. So that's actually not terrible in terms of Vegas prices, but honestly, you do get what you pay for. So you're obviously getting a much more, standard room. And sometimes it's going to have like the exposed air conditioner, which is very much not a thing that is normal here in Las Vegas, at least anymore. But again, it's what you paid for. And you're looking at getting stuff that is going to be somewhere inside of your price range, because when you compare it to other hotels in the Strip, the average room price for a hotel in Las Vegas Boulevard is between $275 and $315 per night at one of like more like a slightly higher end hotel. For example, like Park MGM or places like, let's say, let's use like the Mirage or something like that. Mirage before it closed. That was going to be my, standard question. Mandalay Bay is actually a really great comp. Mandalay Bay, you can usually find rooms between $250 and $300 a night on, most of the time. So it does fluctuate and does change. So like if we're looking at June 14th, which is Friday, the room prices jump up to $200. So this is what's called dynamic pricing, which most people understand, and that's the way that it works for hotels. But it does jump up to $200 on the weekends. So just in comparison, let's look at, for example, the Sahara, the other hotel that we were talking about. The Sahara Hotel, similar in pricing, but I would say they've been renovated much more recent than the Excalibur, so the actual rooms themselves are going to be nicer than what they have at the Excalibur Hotel. So their prices for the week, for example, on Tuesday is $79, and then on Wednesday is $99, and on Thursday goes up to $230. So obviously there's quite a price difference in between those two hotels. So what is the difference? So besides the rooms themselves are going to be what obviously constitutes the price for all this. But you have to take in all the ancillary things that go along with it. The Sahara Hotel may have nicer rooms, but you have to remember the location for a lot of these hotels. The Sahara itself is very much in what we would call like the dead zone of the Las Vegas Strip. The closest hotel to the Sahara would be like the Stratosphere, which again is much more of a budget hotel. And then on the other side of it would be the Fontainebleau. And the Fontainebleau is not right next door. You do have to do a little bit of a walk, not extremely long walk, but it is a walk from the Sahara to the Fontainebleau, which would be another level of a hotel by the Sahara. So honestly, you don't have a lot of foot traffic in that space, which means if you stay at the Sahara, you're going to be waking up at the Sahara. You're probably going to be eating breakfast at the Sahara, and then you're probably going to hang out at the pool, might gamble. But you have to, I find, when you stay in these hotels, when you stay in the same hotel for more than, let's just say, 2 hours, it does feel like you've seen everything. And that's coming from somebody who's lived in Las Vegas. I've walked around places, I've gotten lost in places, and I stayed at Caesar's Palace over the course of a weekend, and I was like, man, I've run out of things to do in here, and it's only 2 o'clock. So really, you run out of things quickly, and Caesar's Palace is a much larger property than the Sahara. So you do have to take into account what is around your property. So honestly, if I had to say picking between the Sahara and the Excalibur in this particular situation, I would pick the Excalibur. The Excalibur is not going to have superior rooms than the Sahara just because, again, the Sahara has much newer rooms in terms of renovations, but the Excalibur is in a fantastic location. It's essentially on the south end of the Strip. It's sort of like the south center of the Strip, because if you get to the Excalibur, you do have access to the Luxor, the Mandalay Bay. If you go south, if you go north, which is where most of the rest of the Strip is going to be, you have access to places like the New York, the Park MGM. Then you can take the tram. You can get to the Bellagio, the Aria. You can also walk over to the MGM Grand if you wanted to. So you have all these different options that have all these other different experiences inside of them. So really, you have to sort of function, what am I going to be using this property for? There are some properties that are quite self-sustainable. So places like, let's just say, Resorts World, Fontainebleau, Caesar's Palace, those are properties that have a lot of things in them that you would stay there for. I will add a caveat to this. I do like Fontainebleau, but I have to say, I haven't been to their pool yet, but their pool looks fabulous. I would actually go to the Fontainebleau again just so I can try out their pool, because their pool is huge and it's sprawling. And I usually don't like saying stay by the pool all day, but there are some pools that are really worth being at the pool all day long. Some are not. For example, I went to the Park MGM, and I was there with my brother and like a bachelor weekend or something, like they had their wives or whatever. And it's a fun pool, but not for all day. They don't have enough cool features at the pool. They don't have a swim-up bar. They have like it's sort of segregated in terms of which the pools are at. Like one's an adult pool, one's like just another regular pool. But the adult pool didn't have anything separate than the other pools that made me, made it cool. Cool pools have a lot of things in them. So, for example, like Caesar's Palace has a fantastic pool. I can hang out all day at the Caesar's Palace pool because it's so huge, it's sprawling, you get a nice little eye candy walking around, and I'm hoping that is what the Fontainebleau pool is like as well. But again, when I say why I don't think Fontainebleau is a self-sustaining hotel where you can spend all day there. Other than the pool, there's not a lot of things to do during the daytime. It's really a nighttime, evening hotel, in my opinion. They have great lounges, great restaurants. They have good gambling. I like their gambling there because I like craps, and they have $15 craps for the most part. But not really a lot of stuff to do in the daytime, which I'm not a big fan of. So, to each their own. Some people just enjoy hanging out at the sportsbook all day. And I have a friend who works at the sportsbook, so I'll go all the time. But like Resorts World, I think is the thing you can do during the daytime. They have a fantastic spa. Fontainebleau also has a spa. But they have a spa. They have a lot of restaurants on the inside. They have a good pool as well. They have a very nice rooftop bar, which is also nice. But they have certain things you could do during the daytime, which is nice. But again, you still have to get outside and walk someplace, so you're able to walk over to like the Wynn, the Encore. They're somewhat within walking distance. But again, those hotels are, closer to my part of the town. But anyways, that's going back to the Excalibur of why I picked it, because you're able to walk to all those different properties and you're getting the right price. You also have to understand who you're going with. If you're going with significant other only, or if you're going with kids or children, you have to take these things into account. Because if you are going with a family, Sahara would probably not be a good option because there is nothing for kids to do inside of the Sahara. And there's also nothing to walk around in that area either. Some people might say, well, it's right next to the world's largest gift shop. Yeah, it's not great for kids. You don't want your kids getting lost in that area because no security to help you find them. But if you're able to go to places like, for example, if you have kids, you can stay at the Excalibur. They have an arcade inside of it. It's one of the more substantial arcades on the Las Vegas Strip. From there, you can walk over to New York, which also has more arcades. They have a roller coaster. So there are things for kids to do there. If you want, you can walk, take the tram all the way down to Caesar's Palace. They have a mall. The Mandalay Bay has their Mandalay Bay Shops, which is sort of in the in-between area, which I think they also have an ice bar, a -5 ice bar where you can take kids. Double check me on that because we have multiples now, and during the daytime you are able to take children, which is actually kind of cool. But again, these are in very saturated areas where you're able to have access to a bunch of these things. You really have to think about, okay, in terms of budget, how much is it worth it? Because, like I said, if you stay at Excalibur, their rooms go for about, let's just say $50. On the weekends, they do jump up to about $200, which again is still below the average for most hotels in the Las Vegas Strip on the weekends, especially during the summer. So I would say Excalibur is worth it because their rooms are not too bad. New York is sort of similar as well, where I would say it's right on the fringe of being budget as well as like a middle tier hotel property. So you really have to balance, I think. There are some places that are extremely affordable, but you really should be thinking about it before you're staying there. Everybody knows the one I'm going to talk about, and that is Circus Circus. Circus Circus, you can get a room for like $15. That is a definite problem, just because it is not in a fantastic location. It is actually just past Resorts World, which makes it even further walk. I even forget that it's there sometimes, but there's nothing inside of it that's going to entice you to want to stay there. They have the giant Adventure Dome, which really hasn't been relevant in a very long time, but they have the Adventure Dome. They have a very, very small casino. The casino was built in the 60s. They have the Midway, which again, for children, but even for kids, I don't think this place is worth it because you have places like the Excalibur, the New York, the Luxor. You have these budget hotels that, again, are next to other properties that have more things inside of them, and they're a step above Circus Circus. Circus Circus, to me, is the very bottom tier of the Las Vegas Strip. Right next to it, its neighbor is the Travelodge. So that kind of is all I need to tell you about Circus Circus. Yes, I know they have the world-famous Circus Circus Steakhouse. You can take a taxi there, have dinner, and leave. You don't have to stay there. By the way, I think it's super overrated. It's almost like not worth going to Circus Circus to try their steakhouse. That's just me. That's all it is. But let's venture to another hotel that's on the center part of the Strip. So let's talk about the Link. The Link itself is actually not bad. So their prices for the weekdays, again, are between $20 and $31. And then you can also get rooms on the weekends for $150 to $167. These are with promos, such and such. So again, after resort fees and everything, you're probably spending close to about $200 a night, all in, for the Link Hotel. You have to always try to find and see when these rooms have been renovated. And again, doesn't change the water pressure a lot. A lot of times the water pressure will be the same, but at least you get a nice clean room. Usually everything is more updated, especially when things have been renovated. And that's such an important fact to remember is when hotels have been renovated, especially when they're on a budget. Obviously, if you're staying at places like the Wynn, the Encore, the Venetian, the Palazzo, there really shouldn't be any, super obvious slip-ups like water pressure and things of this nature. Chipped, furniture and things of that sort. You probably shouldn't see that at a five-star hotel. Budget hotels tend to have it because they have more people that stay in it. They typically will have, more luggage. They'll typically have, sometimes people just who are on a budget tend not to treat hotel rooms very nicely. And that's just the way that it is. But again, people who stay in very expensive hotels tend to not treat their hotel rooms just as good either. It's just we have more replacement things for them. But regardless, let's talk about it. So the Link actually is in a fantastic location. The Link is right across from Caesar's Palace. You can walk over to the Venetian, the Palazzo from there. You can also walk over to the Paris, the Horseshoe. It is in an absolutely fabulous location. And you really have to take that into consideration because that means you are going to be saving on taxis, on Ubers, transportation. This is definitely something that you have to take into account. And it's because it's on the center of the Strip that it is more expensive and worth it. Even if you don't like the restaurants that are inside of that property, I'm looking at you, Guy Fieri, it has access to places like Caesar's Palace that has so many different celebrity chefs like Bobby Flay, more Gordon Ramsay stuff. They also have places like Water Grill at Caesar's Palace, which is really good. They have a Gordon Ramsay restaurant at the Harrah's Hotel, which is also connected to the Link. You have access to the Link Promenade, which is where you find the big Ferris wheel, and many, many restaurants like the Tilted Kilt, American Bar. They have a really, really nice barbecue restaurant as well. They have an In-N-Out Burger on that street. They also have different experiences on the Link Promenade that are really great for kids, like VR experiences. They have good shopping for like hats and things like that. Entertainment like Brooklyn Bowl. So there are so many awesome reasons why you would stay at the Link if you're trying to stay on a budget and be within walking distance of all these really fantastic things. And again, it's really important to keep that in mind when you're booking these hotels, to look at a map. Please, everybody, look at a map. I know it sounds ridiculous, but every once in a while, I know you think the Strip is kind of all just one thing. Looking at a map is the most important thing to booking a hotel on the Strip, especially if you have not been here before. Look at a map, see where it's located, look at some pictures. I don't want you to go overboard with the reviews. That's one of the biggest things that people make a mistake of when booking hotels in Las Vegas, is that you look at the reviews on Yelp, TripAdvisor, whatever, and you're really going to see a lot of the worst photos from places like that. It's a little bit of user error. Some people don't take the greatest photos. They don't do it for a living. A lot of times people go out there to vent a lot of their problems. Working in a hotel, you find that there is always circumstantial things that happen to a guest stay. And a guest will never tell you that they were ever the problem. They'll never come out and say, you know what? I was an asshole. I really deserved what I got by not getting a refund on my room. It's very rare a guest will say that they were the problem. And as a hotel, we're not going to say that person was terrible. So you don't get to see that part of it. It's really a one-sided sort of conversation. It's good to get context. If you get a lot of the same reviews over and over and over again, then yes, of course, that is a trend. If you get a lot of trends that say, the room was dirty when I got back from my stay. The room was dirty when I got back from being out all day. If you get a lot of those, that might stack up and be a problem. If you get a lot of the same complaints, that might be an issue that you have to look into. But you have to do your legwork on that. But one person saying they had a bad experience because they had to check in later because the computers were down, really hard to sort of fix a computers are down situation. Believe me, nobody at the front desk wants that to happen, and nobody in housekeeping wants to not get to their rooms. So again, it's a lot of circumstantial things, especially you have to read or sift through on TripAdvisor. So don't go crazy with the reviews, but it's good to sort of just get sort of like the vibe of what you're going to be getting out of that hotel experience. I'll use my example. So I was actually going on a trip to California, and I was like, I wonder how this hotel is, because it's pretty cheap to stay at this property. And you kind of go through reviews and you look at pictures. It's really good to not just look at like a grid map of where things are. It's really important to do like Google Maps and do like a street view. This is something that I've always done when I go on vacations that go pretty far away, like New York or, Los Angeles, areas that I'm not familiar with, or if I'm staying in LA someplace and I've never been to that particular area, I'll do a Google Maps. I'll get Google Maps or Google Earth, whatever, and then I'll go to Street View. And then I'll go ahead and drop down and do the street just to see what it looks like, see what's around the surrounding areas. And you kind of have to go from there. For example, I stayed at a Marriott in Beverly Hills because I was able to get a discount. And I was like, oh, man, this is like really cheap. I wonder why. A lot of times you get discounts on those like really nice properties like Beverly Hills Marriott. Which is still very much like a Marriott you get any place else. But it was really cool when I checked in. They like offered like wine service, that was never done that before. Because they're Beverly Hills, so they're trying to be fancy. They also didn't let you do self-parking. You had to valet park at their thing, so it was more expensive. So yes, I did take the free champagne. But anyways, Look at the street view. You're like, I don't know so much about this place. But once I was like, I just took a leap of faith. And once you check it out, you're like, oh yeah, it was just fine. But it's important to know like where things are. The reason I wasn't as apprehensive was because this particular Marriott was like 2 blocks away from Rodeo Drive, which most people know what Rodeo Drive looks like. I've driven around that area a couple times before, and I figured I'd be completely fine. So was just fine in that particular area. But this is important. Do street views. Do street views of those properties just so you can see what it looks like. Obviously, the Las Vegas Strip, it's not a huge deal, especially when you're in the middle of the Strip. But it's important to know that, like, the parking for the Link, you have to go on Paradise to get to their parking structure. You can no longer go through the front like the good old days. Man, back in the good old days of old school Vegas, the Harrah's and the Link used to, when you drove, can you believe this? When you drove in, do they even have their front anymore? Yeah, they don't even have it anymore. But you used to be able to park in their valet in the front of the hotel, which was super confusing because you would come in, you'd pull in, and the valet was there, and then the nightclub was like in a box on the opposite side of the main entrance of the hotel because it had like this awning, and then you would have to cross the valet like area to get to that box where the nightclub was. It was so funny. It was hilarious. But they've since actually closed that entire area down, and you can only get to the Link via the back entrance where they have the River Las Vegas Strip, which, if it ever rains, check out like a video of the Link parking garage when it rains, and it's literally like white rapids. They're not really white. It's usually like a brownish color going into the washes down there. So that's the only way to get in. But it's important to note that that is the thing that happens. Same thing for the Flamingo. Like the Flamingo, you have to enter towards the back. These are little intricacies that you have to know when you are coming to Las Vegas if you are going to be driving or just parking anywhere. So that's important. But also in terms of budget hotels typically have a good amount of budget-friendly restaurants on the inside, and sometimes you get a good mix. So places like, for example, Harrah's actually has a Gordon Ramsay restaurant inside of it. They also have a Drew Brees like bar and grill on the inside, and they also have a not Jack Ruby's. Oh my goodness, what is its name? Oh man, I'm gonna get mad because I can't remember it. So as I just sort of start to fill time here, I'm gonna go ahead and search Harrah's Steakhouse. Ruth Chris, there we go. Ruth Chris. By the way, Ruth Chris is a chain restaurant, just so everybody knows that. It's a really good chain. If you're coming to Vegas and eating at a chain steakhouse, maybe try something else. But people like it. People love it. I've lied about many a times about going to Ruth Chris Steakhouse. Just because I had this older couple, they were like, they had to be in their 60s, maybe 70s. Sorry, I said old, and my parents are in their 60s, so sorry, mom and dad. But these people had to be in their 70s. So they were like 70s, maybe 80s. Great that they're traveling. And I said, oh, what are you guys doing for dinner tonight? And they said, oh, we're going to Ruth Chris tonight. We're very excited. And they're like, have you ever been there? I said, oh, yes, it's a very good steakhouse. I was a great liar. It's not lying, really. You're just reaffirming their choice. Because what's worse? Somebody who is excited to go to Ruth Chris Steakhouse, and then I come in and I say, you know what? I don't think it's that good. You think they're going to enjoy their dinner? Probably. But wouldn't it be great just to be like, oh yeah, I really enjoyed Ruth Chris Steakhouse. I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. I think you're going to have a fantastic time. I think they're going to be excited that I reaffirmed the purchase of going to Ruth Chris Steakhouse. There are obviously some places that I'll maybe suggest not to go to, but Ruth Chris, I think they're going to deliver, a perfectly fine steak. And again, for people who are in their 80s, I'm not trying to change their schedule. If it's somebody in their 20s, I might, let them know there are other options out there and maybe in their either price range or either in their vibe. Or if I'm like, you know what, you really just don't need to go there. I'm looking at you, Poppy Steak. just place I just try to enhance the experience for the guests. That was always the biggest thing. So that's the thing. But anyways, Harrah's has Ruth Chris Steakhouse, which is a thing. They also have a Gordon Ramsay restaurant, which is fantastic. Flamingo, I think, is getting a new country bar, which is a huge deal. Just got rid of Margaritaville. But again, these places have many, many restaurants on the inside. Like, let's just look at the Excalibur. Excalibur itself has a lot of chain places that are good for kids. They have a Buca de Beppo. They have Dick's Last Resort, which is great for people who are here on a budget, who are here for like a bachelor or bachelorette party. People love that stuff. They have their own steakhouse, which is very much like I remember watching their commercials during like the mid 2000s, early 2000s, where the hotel page would be pumping like, oh, this is this great steakhouse, and like they would have like the knife going through the steak. It's fantastic. But again, close to a lot of things on the property, easy for everybody, very accessible. Same thing with places like Luxor. Like Luxor has so many different, to me, sort of generic restaurants, but it's good, especially if you're here, again, on a budget. There are places that are also, not chains. Places like Tender Steak. They have a Japanese place at the Luxor as well. They have a Mexican place called Diablo's Cantina, which my dad is very sad that it is no longer at the Park MGM. So you're going to find these kind of places. And then even so, you can always go to the Mandalay Bay, which Mandalay Bay, I would say, is a step above, but it is next to two budget-friendly hotels. And if you choose correctly, like the Luxor or the Excalibur, you still have access to those places. So you are within walking distance of those things. If you go to Sahara, for example, or stay at the Sahara, sorry, Sahara, that we're picking on you, but this is just for the deal. You're kind of isolated to that spot. They do have a beautiful Italian restaurant called Bella or Bea. And then they also have, oh my goodness, Jose Andres has a restaurant over there. I always forget these things, guys, when I start doing it here. They have Bazard Meat. I always forget the name of Bazard Meat, and it's super high end. But if you're not here for that type of steak, it's going to be like kind of out of your price range. But you're stuck with it. That's your only steak option within that area, unless you got to leave and you got to walk a long way. They also have the Noodle Den, Uno Mas, which is like street tacos and whatever. But you get the point. So that's sort of what we're talking about here when I'm saying you got to look out for where you're staying here on the Las Vegas Strip. Hey everybody, this is Brian Ortega from Concierge Confidential, and this episode is brought to you by AO Painting, who have been experts in specialized coating servicing Arizona for over 40 years. AO Painting specializes in industrial projects and are a one-stop shop for sandblasting, industrial painting, waterproofing, and much, much more. To see more of their work and to get a quote, you can visit aopaintinginc.com. That's aopaintinginc.com. AO Painting, where specialized is where we start. But yeah, going forward, I mean, it's always up to you. It's always up to you to where you want to stay. But just when you do budget properties, you really, really have to take a look at what is around that space, does it make it worth it, and who are you bringing on your trip. You also should do a lot of research, especially for budget hotels, more so than hotels like, let's just say, the Aria or Cosmo or Bellagio, of what is shut down at the property and when the rooms are renovated. So it's important to know those intricacies, because then sometimes you get really good deals. Like the Horseshoe right now has so much construction going on the outside of the hotel, but they've renovated some of the Horseshoe rooms, which is nice. But I mean, you got to do a little bit of research. Same thing with like the Rio. Oh my God. So many social media people in Vegas, Twitter, talking about the Rio, and I just can't stand it. They're saying, oh, it's been busier than ever. Well, it's because half of the hotel is shut down. Half of the hotel's gone. They're like still renovating the rooms, which they've renovated actually a good chunk of them, to be honest. But the hotel itself, which is isolated, so much of it is shut down. So it's like, yeah, it looks busy because like half of the casino is shut down. So of course it's busy because everybody else is at the same tables. So it's just so annoying. So annoying. Fucking hate Vital Vegas. I hate that guy. So anyways, hate's a strong word, but I mean it. So anyways, make sure you do your research. Make sure you know that they're doing construction or not doing construction. That's very, very important as well. But just make sure to see when things were renovated and, just see what's around there and see what actually works best for your vacation, because that's very, very important. So anyways, that was this week's Concierge Confidential. We did a little bit of budget talk, which I hopefully thought was helpful in terms of like trying to find a spot. Most budget hotels are, just fine. The hotels I would avoid are like Circus, Travelodge. Wouldn't stay at those two places. I'm not a huge fan of like Harrah's, but Harrah's like rooms are actually quite nice. My grandparents stayed there 4 or 5 years ago, and it was just renovated, and it was actually a really, really nice room. Really, really fantastic. So, again, sometimes you're just pleasantly surprised. But anyways, that was Concierge Confidential. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. This is the last week of Restaurant Week. Hopefully you guys were able to try some of that if you're a local listening to the pod, or you're from California and you're close by and you can come in whenever you want. Hopefully you enjoyed it. But that was this week's Concierge Confidential. I'll hopefully see you guys again next week. Again, if you see me out in town, come say hello. But remember, keep it confidential.